Hello to all my guys, gals, and HOA hating pals. Welcome to Austin Stories. I am Austin. Today we have some nasty FHOA stories where the HOA is cost nearly $750,000 by OP and just makes them file for bankruptcy. And an aunt gets back at the HOA for getting fines for, get this, shoveling her sidewalk in dangerous ice. And also, all my videos are in podcast form. Search up the Austin Stories podcast on your local provider or check out the link I have for you in the description below. Here we go. HOA unfairly fines my aunt for not shoveling her sidewalk, posted by Stalin Plus Love, posted in FHOA. Fun fact, the F stands for friendly. Not really. Since it's winter in the northern hemisphere and we're getting our fair share of snow, I have a story for my aunt. My aunt lives in a gated community in the Pacific Northwest. She's at a higher altitude, so she gets a bit of snow. She's a nice lady, very active, and always helps other people. Her HOA is a drinking club, as she describes them, have a whole bunch of rules, some totally ridiculous, heavily enforced, and always changing. Usually, when rules are changed, they get posted on some online community bulletin board from the days of dial-up. Also, they like to fine and shame people. My aunt never attended meetings because she has, and I quote, no time for drinking and cigarettes. As per usual with a lot of bylaws, you have to clear the sidewalk in front of your house of snow and ice. My aunt, being the woman that she is, and living in a 55 plus community, she always shovels her walk, and then she salts it for ice. A couple of years ago, there was a heavier than usual snowfall, maybe over 20 inches in the higher elevations, with some warm days and then freezing temperatures for a few days after. So, first snowfall, she gets up early and shovels her sidewalk and her walk and sprinkles down some salt. It snows a few inches more, so in the later afternoon, she shovels the walk again and decides to salt again. She literally said she tossed a few handfuls of salt, and the neighbor across the street comes running out, demanding that she stop salting and it's a violation of HOA rule whatever crap. It seems that a no salt rule was added to their book of great HOA rules. The reasoning is that the salt crystals are unsightly and posted on the unusable bulletin board from 1999, which at this point, the online bulletin board had been replaced by an under maintenance error page for the past few months. So there was no way the drunken HOA rule changes could be relayed to the commoners. Well, my aunt apologizes, gets a warning for the first time that she salted, and a second for the handful of salt that she applied in the second salting, and then gets another warning for not properly clearing the sidewalk. Well, my aunt left maybe a strip of about 2 or 3 inches for about 2 feet on the edge of her sidewalk, which wasn't properly cleared of snow. Not a big deal, she made an excellent effort, but the HOA neighbor didn't think so. Next violation would be a fine. Also, she had to clean up all the rock salt with a broom. My aunt ended up getting the new HOA rules in writing from the HOA neighbor, which she read over and realized they only stated salt in the sidewalk snow shoveling rule, but nothing that blue salt free ice melt. Also, it was stated that the sidewalk should stay free of ice at all times. Also, she read a bit deeper to learn that street and sidewalk cleaning is covered by the HOA twice a year or as needed. Instead of risking HOA wrath of fines and some public shaming because now it's near impossible to prevent the sidewalk from freezing up, she decides she will challenge the vodka-induced reasoning of the HOA and will use the blue non-salt ice melt to keep her sidewalk ice-free. The next day, after an overnight snowfall, she heads to the local hardware store to buy some blue non-salt ice melt, strikes up a conversation with the shop owner about her issue, who recommends these blue ice melting pellets, and throws in a bag of clay kitty litter on the house so she can, and I quote, stick it to them idiots. Now that afternoon, the temperature rises just above freezing and there is a heavy wet snowfall of a few inches which hits the ground wet, melts, and refreezes when the temperatures go below freezing at nighttime. So instead of risking having a skating rink for a sidewalk, she clears the wet snow and then dumps a bunch of these blue ice melting pellets and a whole bunch of kitty litter. Overnight, it freezes. Next day, she has the most ice-free sidewalk in all of the neighborhood, and it's covered in ice melt pellets. Well, it rains that day. Her use of kitty litter and blue ice melt pellets don't go unnoticed by HOA neighbor. That afternoon, she is fined by the HOA officer in charge of fines for breaking rule #vodka or pound vodka, depends on what generation you're from, section stale cigarette smoke. She sees nothing wrong. The road is salted and sanded and it looks like a mess, so her sidewalk doesn't look too bad, all blue and gray speckled and ice-free. Then she gets a notice to clean up the salt, which she ignores because it's not salt she is using to de-ice her sidewalk, but blue salt-free ice melt pellets and clay kitty litter. Then that day it rained and then froze and continued to rain, and then snow caused everything to be covered in ice and snow the next morning. It was a disaster. My aunt cleared the snow from her sidewalk and applied more blue pellets and kitty litter, which wasn't a task because luckily she had already applied so much that there was already no ice on her sidewalk or snow. Everyone else in the neighborhood had to chip the underlayer of ice after they risked a horrific fall while clearing the top layer of snow. She was then fined again, while neighbors had to actually walk in the messy street in some parts because sidewalks in some spots were unwalkable. Warnings and fines were given to other unsuspecting neighbors who couldn't attend the HOA booze meetings and had mistakenly used salt or had not chipped and cleared all the sidewalk ice in an acceptable amount of time. The next few days were blue skies and below freezing with ice everywhere. Sidewalks had been chipped, but they iced up over time with a thin layer of slick ice called black ice. People were falling, and my aunt now had a couple of rogue neighbors using all types of non-salt ice melt. One guy made up a solution of brine and molasses, which he sprayed on and got great results. Others used sand, brine, non-salt ice melters, and even 15 gallons of wine, which turned into vinegar, was applied. The HOA's alcohol consumption probably increased as the officer fell on a patch of black ice out in front of his home, breaking his elbow while returning from delivering fines, warnings, and general nastiness. Eventually, the weather returned to above freezing levels and rain which washed away all the various ice-melting substances. The rogue neighbors gathered at my aunt's house, enjoying the tea and snacks. Among them was the man who used brine and molasses, who happened to have a license to practice law and was retired with nothing else better to do than to, and I quote, ruin the drunk, useless HOA at the next meeting, end quote. He then invited himself to the next meeting with a file folder of all the fines and warnings, with a statement of dispute for each one. Also brought his tablet to prove the online bulletin board wasn't working, which helped the case that the HOA was not providing proper means of communication to the residents, which meant that the residents could sign a petition to fire the standing HOA members and appoint an interim HOA until the election. My aunt was appointed treasurer, found the previous regime spent HOA funds at the liquor store. The retired lawyer president then went after the previous HOA for funds spent on booze, and they lived happily ever after. I mean, look, it is one thing to have just a stupid HOA rule, right? But when you're literally messing with life and limb with people, you are going to fall on ice. That's dangerous. I don't know if you've ever slipped on ice. You don't want to do it, okay? Do not recommend. You're going to go to the hospital. It sucks. But listen, you're just endangering the homeowners. I recently read a story where the HOA Karen president endangered the first responders and the homeowners. And that's just so stupid. Like, of all the rules to have, why this? And the other thing that I noticed from this story that I cannot help but mention in my comments here is that the #vodka or # vodka. I was reading that and I'm like, which generation are you from to know? I'm from the # generation myself. Let me know where you're from yourself in the comments section. Love to talk to you there. How to get rid of an HOA, posted by Hickdell, also posted in r/friendlyHOA. A good friend of mine has about 4 years ago inherited the house of his grandparents. He decided to live there for the time being till he's decided what to do with the house. He grew up in it, so he didn't really want to sell it. Not even a week after he moved in, he got a visit from a neighborhood committee. They said they are the 3 board members of the HOA, and they're here so he can sign his membership papers. They were extremely nosy and rude. For example, one tried to get into the garage without even so much as asking. When he stopped him and asked where he wanted to go, he had the audacity to say, "I need to check your garage. If everything there is in order, I have a right to do this bi-weekly, and denying me access is an offense that will cost a fine." He then had enough of their audacity and kicked him out of the house. While doing so, one of the board members shoved some papers into his face and told him that he needed to sign this right now. He would live there a week already, and the papers had to be signed before moving in. Once they were gone, he took a look at the papers. They were fluffing ridiculous and gave the HOA rights that were simply unfluffing real. They had, for example, a right to visit your home bi-weekly and check things like that you don't use the garage for, like storage. Don't have gasoline on containers in your garage, and the same goes for gas. You had to mow your lawn every week. Snow had to be shoveled every 2 hours when it snowed, starting at 5:00 in the morning. You could not park more than 1 car on your grounds except inside the garage, and a ton of other bull snot. A few days later, they came back and asked him why he didn't sign the papers yet. They also wanted to check the garage again. This time, he would not even let them in and told them he would never become a member of their stupid club. To them, that meant war. Within a week, they had sent him some fines north of $1,000. Some of them were for denying them access to his home, each worth $250. My friend simply did not take them serious and used their stupid letters to help fire his grill. Then came the day where they went extremely too far. He came back, and one of the board members had broken into his garage, stood in it, and was writing things down on his notepad. But that was not even the worst part. He had 2 wonderful oak trees in the front of his house. They had been planted by his great-grandparents when they were newlyweds and moved into the house. The HOA was in the process of taking them down. They had called a professional crew for this. One was already so damaged, basically all twigs were already down, it was just a stump that was left, and the other one they had just started with. He freaking lost it. He told the tree crew to stop the heck right now, explained to them that he was the owner and what they did was highly illegal. They had no idea, since the board member claimed that the trees were in violation of the rules, since supposedly too many leaves went to the neighbor's garden. He had told them that there was no legal reason to put them down, but the board member claimed that I'd given my okay because the trees were in violation of the rules of the HOA. He looked it up later. They actually had a bylaw that if a garden produces more than one 40-liter sack of leaves within 2 weeks, the garden owner needs to take down the offending trees within 2 weeks. He told them he would overlook them trespassing if they would be witnesses in court for him. Then he called the cops on the board members for trespassing, breaking and entering, and they actually had used a bolt cutter to get into the garage. He had always had it closed with a big freaking bike lock after they tried to get in twice before. The trial must have been glorious. Not only did they have to repay him for the lock in the tree, which was worth a crap ton of money, north of $50,000 if I remember right, plus damages for the second tree. He had a professional tree person look after it, so all the damage healed properly, which alone cost nearly $1,000. But these idiots actually thought the trial would have been unfair, and they tried to fight it, which probably cost them an additional $10,000 to $15,000 in lawyers and court costs. All in all, the trial must have cost them over $120,000. Then he went to civil court and sued them for emotional damage. He told them how much these trees meant to him, since his great-grandparents had planted them with seeds from the home country, and he really laid it out on as thick as he could. Plus, he felt threatened by the HOA and can hardly sleep because he always fears that they're going to try to get into his house. The court actually bought it, and they gave him $500,000 plus the cost for a state-of-the-art alarm system so he can feel safe again in his own home. So, put all together, he cost the HOA nearly $750,000. They had to file for bankruptcy and get a person to check the books so my friend would get his money. The best is for last. The mediator found out that these three pricks had been defrauding the HOA for well over 10 years and were giving out as many fines as they possibly could so they could use it to bolster their income. All three had to sell their houses so they could pay out my friend. And now he is, for most people, one of the favorite people living there, and he constantly gets invited over for grilling and whatnot. You see, most people never wanted the HOA in the first place, but the board member practically forced them to sign the contract, claiming it would not be optional, and if they did not sign before moving, it would be a $500 fine. Only 6 of the over 50 members actually wanted this HOA, and people think they did get part of the action as reward for spying out on their neighbors to find violations. Liam the Bobbit says, favorite story yet, and holy crap, these three musketeers rolling in on their high horses, getting nearly $1 million in collective damages, selling their houses, ruining the entire HOA, just burning it to the ground. I mean, if we're just being honest here, it literally got torched, like arson level crap right here. I mean, did it not? And then just comes out as a favorite. He is the town favorite for standing up to the bullies and just completely knocking them on their butt and then kicking that out from under them too. OP, I don't know what to say other than this is nuclear. There's not even a word for this, okay? It's beyond nuclear revenge, and you have completely obliterated everything about this HOA. It is now an A because there is no man left in it. Way to go, OP. Let me know what you think in the comments too, or if you're listening on the podcast, let me know what you think. HOA Karen president puts first responders and homeowners in danger because of her stupid greed. Click the video on the screen. You do not want to miss the fallout of this story, and I will see you in that crazy next one.